Okay. Okay, yeah. So today we have to start a new question of the speaking section. Let's see. Yesterday and on Tuesday, we were working on question 2 of the speaking section. We already saw the theory, we saw the tips, the template, and we practiced yesterday. So today and tomorrow we'll be working on task number 3, or question 3 of the speaking section. Remember that there are 4 questions in the speaking section, right? We have question 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've already done question 1 and 2, so today we'll start working on question 3. Do you have any questions before we start?
No, everything okay.
Okay, perfect. So let's go to question 3 and let's see what we got. Okay, it's still an academic integrated question. So that means that you will have to be reading something and listening to something and then summarizing. But the difference is that this time you will not have like conversations like you did in the past in question 2. And the topics won't be as casual as question 1 or 2. So it won't be about education or work or lifestyle or so forth, or the university. In this case, what you will have is going to be academic. So let's start by looking at what exactly you have to do. Now, the format is very similar to question 2. You still have to read a text first. You still have 45 seconds to read the text. Then you still have to listen to an audio file that usually lasts 1 minute. And then again, you have 30 seconds to prepare and 1 minute to speak. So everything is the same in terms of the format. The only thing that actually changes is the content, because now you won't be reading an announcement or you won't be listening to a conversation. So let's start looking at it with an example. This one here. So remember we said that you get 45 seconds to read the text, right? So I'm gonna put the timer for 45 seconds so that you can read, and then we'll discuss what we have there. See? Okay. So I'm gonna give you 45 seconds to read this text, and then we'll discuss what we have. Okay. So what we have in this text? Well, what is it about? Can you tell me a little bit what you read?
About the change of the behavior.
Okay, exactly. So what you will have in this text that you have to read is a definition. you have to think of this like you were reading from an academic textbook. So obviously this is an academic topic, and you have an explanation of a certain concept, an explanation of a new concept, a new word, or new, I don't know, it could be anything, right? But in this case, it's a concept. And what concept are we seeing here? The concept of behavior modification, right? That's the main topic of the reading, behavior modification. The text will always have a title, just like the second question, it always has a title. And what you have to do, the first thing that you do as soon as you get the text is take notes on the title. So write down whatever you have in the title, you have to copy it the way it is on your notes. So in this case, you should be writing down behavior modification on your notes right now. Why? Why do you have to write down the title? Because you will have to use it later in your response. You will have to mention the title. So it is important that you have it on your notes. Now, what else do you have? In the text, you're going to have a brief explanation of what behavior modification is, of how it works, maybe some examples, maybe some details. You can have a lot of things related to this topic. But there's only one thing that you actually care about. There's just one thing that you have to make sure that you got and that you will be using in your response. And what is that? That's the definition of the concept. Your job when you're reading this is to find the definition of the key concept. It's always going to be in one sentence. So what is the sentence here that contains the definition of behavior modification? What do you think behavior modification is according to the text?
When an individual learns through experience, that a certain behavior results in relation consequence, that behavior is likely to be a repeat, can be?
I think that's a further explanation. Those are details. But in general, what is behavior modification?
Can be what they have learned about the possible consequences of their action.
Exactly. So behavior modification is when individuals modify or when individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of their actions or of that behavior, right? The definition can be found either in the first sentence or in the last one as well. You usually have some like red flags in the text. For example, the word occurs, that is the red flag here. This is the key word that you can find in a lot of other questions from the same type. So you have words like it occurs when, it is defined as, it is known as. So those words are the ones that you're going to see when you have the definitions. So in this case, behavior modification occurs frequently in everyday settings when individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of that behavior. That is the definition. Now, after you took notes of the title, you also have to take some notes about the definition. So obviously, I'm not asking you to write everything that you have here, but just a few words, right? Maybe you can say change behavior based on consequences, right? Those will be like the keywords for you to later remember the definition. So that's what you have to do when you're reading. You copy the title, you look for the definition, and you take some notes about that definition. Okay? Do you have any questions about that?
Can you repeat as the title, the definition, and the details, Berta?
No, no detail. Write anything down about the details. You won't be needing or using those details. Only the title and the definition. That's everything you need.
Okay, thank you.
When I say definition, I really mean a short definition. Please do not like summarize everything. Okay, it's perfectly fine if you use the same word or if you copy and paste from the text, no problem. Okay. So, all right. So this is like what I was telling you, right? You have the title here in pink. You have some additional details. And then you have the definition, right? And look at the keywords. It also occurs when, so behavior modification occurs when individuals change their behavior. Do you have any questions about this?
No, no question. Everything is okay.
Okay. Now, after you read the text, you will have to listen to an audio file. Now, this audio file is going to be a lecture. Do you know what a lecture is?
Yes, yes, I know.
Okay. So it's like a university class, right? You will be hearing a professor. The person who speaks is going to be called the professor, and you will be hearing him or her basically continue explaining the same topic. So the professor will continue explaining the topic of behavior modification, but the professor will explain it, giving you real life examples. So you will have some real examples about behavior modification. So how you see behavior modification in real life, when you see it, maybe an experiment that demonstrates behavior modification, but you'll have real examples of this concept. Okay? You can have one or two examples, it depends on the topic, but no matter how many you have, your job is to listen to those examples or that example, take notes because you only listen to it once, and mostly focus on the relationship between the text and the examples. So your job, you already know what behavior modification is, right? And this is really key. I would say the key to understanding well and classifying your information from the example or from the lecture is to really know what the concept and the definition is. So we know that behavior modification is when individuals change their behavior based on the consequences of that behavior. So you have to look for who are these individuals. You will probably have an example of these individuals. You probably have an example of a behavior of how these people change that behavior based on the consequences. So you have to look out for those things. Okay? So I'm gonna play the lecture now. Please hear the examples and take a few notes. Then we'll talk about it.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Say there's a little boy or girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning they might, I don't know, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down, just misbehaving in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to.
Okay. So that was the lecture. So what can you tell me about the example? What was the example in this case?
The example was about kids on schools, and when they start school and there is a rule in the classroom, and they must be sit down, and if they are not, the teacher can be angry, and so their behavior can be. And the kids understand that that behavior can be a trouble. And if the teacher put a happy face and have a good direction about other behaviors, a positive behavior, then they can understand that behavior is a good answer and not the other behavior that they used to.
Perfect, great. So I like what you're saying and I like the way you're saying it. Maybe you're missing one more detail. Well, let's talk about this. So here's a transcript of the lecture. Okay, so as you said, first of all, let's give some context about the example. This example is about kids in schools, right? And as you said, initially, when kids are new, well, in the classroom, we have some rules, right? Like kids are not supposed to be walking around the classroom. They have to raise their hand. They cannot talk when the teacher is speaking. But when a kid is new, they don't know the rules, right? What happens? As you said, when the kids misbehave, when they don't do what they have to, or they behave in a poor way, when they misbehave, what is the consequence of that behavior? They get punished, right? And however, on the other hand, when they behave well, when they behave properly, so when they raise their hand, when they pay attention, the consequence of that action is a reward. So they get rewarded by the teacher. They can have this happy face sticker, or the teacher tells them that she's proud. So they get rewarded. So that's basically illustrating the idea that when you have a behavior, when you act in a certain way, that behavior has consequences, right? So when the kid misbehaves, they get punished. When the kid behaves well, they get rewarded. But here's the most important part. The most important part is the way that they learn, right? As you said, they learn what reaction they can get from the teacher. And based on that learning that they do, they change their behavior. They modify their behavior. Because initially, they started misbehaving, right? Initially, they started behaving in a poor way. But then they learned that behaving well gets them a good reaction. So they changed or they modified their behavior. And that is the connection that this has with the definition, right? The definition was when individuals, in this case kids, modify or change their behavior, in this case how they behave in class, based on the consequences of that behavior, right? In this case, based on the teacher's reaction, whether these are positive or negative. So the important thing is that you understand very well the definition, so that then you can use it to classify the information here. What I underlined, that's the most important information from the lecture. Okay, and that is what you have to be mentioning in your response. Is it clear how this is an example of the reading? Do you have any questions so far?
Yes, I don't have question.
Okay, perfect. And then you get the question. Well, where's the question? Here's the question. Now the question says, using the example from the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works. Now it's an interesting question because they are not asking you to summarize everything, right? They're not telling you summarize the lecture and summarize the reading. No, they want you to explain the concept. They want you to explain what behavior modification is and how it works. But don't explain it just with the definition, right? Don't tell me behavior modification is when people change their behavior. No, you have to use the example from the lecture. So you have to use the example about kids in schools to explain the concept. So basically what they want you to do is to put everything together, the reading and the listening, in order to explain the concept. It's like you're explaining this to a 10-year-old kid. You know, usually when you explain concepts and things like this to children, you usually have to give examples, right? That's the best way that they're going to understand. So it's the same here. You have to explain the concept using that example. Okay? So do you have any questions about that?
Is the definition and an example, right?
Exactly. Definition. And after you hear the question, you get 30 seconds to prepare and 60 to speak. The preparation time, as I already said, I think you can use it depending on what your needs are. So you can either work on your notes, work on your ideas, work on your articulation, whatever it is that you need to do during those 30 seconds. But during the response time, during the 60 seconds that you have to answer this question here, here's what we're gonna do. We have a template for this. Here's the template. Now, remember that you have how many seconds to speak?
1 minute.
1 minute, exactly. So 60 seconds. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have an introduction, and then we will have the body of our response. Your introduction should be short. Remember that introductions can really not be that long. I recommend your introduction to be from 10 to 15 seconds, and that's the maximum time you can spend. Because if you spend like 20 seconds in your introduction, that's already 1/3 of the response, and that's already too much. So 15 seconds is your limit. And in the introduction, what you have to do is pretty simple. You will have to mention the topic, which is the title that you wrote down in your notes. You have it on your notes. And you have to mention the definition that you also have in your notes and you extracted from the reading. For example, you can say, according to the passage, behavior modification occurs when people change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of it. Okay? So that's it. You explain the topic, the title, and the definition. And that's your introduction, 10 to 15 seconds. Any questions so far?
No, everything is okay.
Right? And after you've explained, after you've had your introduction, you basically have to talk about the example. So talk about the example, but always making sure that you emphasize on the important information, right? Which is the one that's related to the definition, sorry. So maybe you can have a short transition where you say, in the lecture, the professor gives the example of, and here you start talking about the example of kids. Now, it's important that you also write down the pronoun of the professor, because you're going to have to use reporting verbs like the professor explains, the professor says, the professor states. So in this case, it was a male professor, right? I think, so it's a he. You also have to write it down in your notes as soon as you hear the professor speak. And then you have to just explain what you have in the example. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Now you do not need a conclusion, and you can give one only if you have extra time. So if you have some time that you don't know what to do there, then you can say, in summary, this is a glaring example of behavior modification. And that's it. Okay, any questions?
No, everything is okay. I understand.
Okay. So I'm gonna do it so that I can give you a sample response. And then we'll practice and I'll give you some more tips. So here's the time. According to the reading passage, behavior modification occurs when people change or modify their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of children at school. He explains that initially, when children are new in a certain school, they don't know the rules about the classroom. So they're probably going to start misbehaving initially. They may walk around the classroom when they are not supposed to do that. They may not raise their hand. Therefore, the professor punishes the kids. Then, on the other hand, if the kids behave well and they do what they have to, the professor rewards them. As a result, the kids learn how to behave properly in class and what reaction they get according to their behavior, and they modify their initial behavior. They change their misbehavior initially to a better behavior based on what they've learned. The reaction from the teacher is going to be. Right? So that's it. As you can see, my introduction was 10 seconds exactly. You can have 15 if you want. I have the transition there. And something that I really like to say is, in the example, you have to focus on the relevant information, right? So I'm not focusing on the details of like, the teacher gets a happy face sticker. the kid gets a happy face sticker. The teacher tells the student that she's proud of them, or the teacher is not raising his hand, or the student in that case, right? So I'm not getting into the details. I'm going for the general ideas that illustrate the really key concept, right? Which is how kids learn what the consequences of their actions are and how they change their behavior based on that learning. So that's it. That's what you have to do. It's just a matter of practice. Try to use some transitions the way that I did. So therefore, as a result, on the other hand, those always help. But that's pretty much it. Is it okay? Do you have any questions?
No, everything is okay.
So, all right, before we start practicing, because we're going to be doing all other questions, I wanted to talk to you also about the topics. So what topics can you find here in this question? Actually, these are the same topics for question 3 and question 4 of the speaking section. And what are these topics? Well, you have psychology, biology, and business as the major, most common topics. So that means that 90% of the time you will have either psychology, biology, or business. When you have psychology, it's mostly just about how our mind works, how our brain works, so how we learn things. For example, the one that we did was psychology, right? So how kids learn, how kids behave, how kids modify their behavior, or how people change their behavior. So that's psychology, behavior, learning, memory, interactions, that type of thing. You also have biology, which is always animal or plant or biology for plants. Okay? It's never human biology. And in biology, they usually talk about adaptations that animals go through, that plants go through, life processes, the way that animals like interact with each other, the way that they find food, the way that they escape from predators. Same thing for plants, right? The way that plants defend themselves from insects, that type of thing. You never will have something like human biology or anatomy or that type of thing. In business, it's usually just different marketing techniques, advertisement, ways to attract consumers, pricing strategies. I guess that's it, right? Like maybe customer support, but usually marketing. And those are the 3 most common topics. Now, obviously, there's always a chance that you get something different. So maybe you have something related to history, to art, to literature, to, I don't know. Those are usually the most common, the ones that I've seen. But that's not very likely to happen, it's really rare to have one of those topics. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because it is really important that you do have some vocabulary for these topics because you will have a lot of new words, right? Maybe for psychology, there's going to be one that's comfort zone bias, right? So if you don't know what bias is, you're going to be a little bit lost. Same thing for biology, right? Maybe you have to have words like predators, prey, adaptations, evolving, I don't know, like maybe some names of animals. You have to know that. For business, again, you need to use appropriate vocabulary, right? So you need to have things like consumers, customers, advertising, ads, strategies, I don't know, like franchising, company business, pricing. I don't know. You have to have those words, right? So that you can use them and that you can understand them when you find them in the text. Now, how do you improve your vocabulary? Don't ever like memorize words or lists of words, but instead try to practice listening and reading about topics on these subjects. So maybe you can watch some TED Talks on biology or on psychology topics. You can watch National Geographic videos. You can listen to business podcasts. So that's the way that you better work on vocabulary by learning them with context, right? That's the only way that you're actually going to be able to use those words and remember them. Okay? So that's it. Those are the topics you can have. Usually when you have psychology, you just have one example. When you have biology, you also have one. And when you have business, you may have two or one examples. Is that okay? Any questions?
No, no questions. Everything is okay. So in this case, it can be useful in TED Talks.
Sorry, TED Talks?
Yes, TED Talks.
Yeah, they can be useful, totally, but they have to be about these topics, right? So if you listen to a TED Talk about like statistics or math, maybe not, right? But there are a lot of like psychology TED Talks, and also don't listen to like 15-minute long TED Talks. There's like these short TED Talks on. There's also another website that's similar to TED Talk, which is TED. So, for example, if we look for TED Psychology or TED Talk Psychology as well, then you have a lot of psychology lessons here. And the vocabulary is really great related to, in things that, for example, this one here that is 4 minutes long, seeing things that aren't there, and then you have a specific concept. It is very likely maybe you even have the same concept in one of these questions, right? Self-talk, suffering, pain, grief, all those concepts are going to be really useful in order to improve your psychology vocabulary, right? For biology, National Geographic videos, those are the best ones. And for business, usually podcasts. There are a lot of podcasts in Spotify related to business ideas, business tips. Those usually have good vocabulary. Or there are also some business English podcasts that you can also listen to, and they are especially for English learners. So that helps as well. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Andrea.
Okay, sure. So we've done already a psychology one. Why don't we do a business and a biology one so that we're done with the three of them, and tomorrow we practice. To be honest, I would say, at least personally, I think it depends on students. But to me, biology is the hardest one. Psychology is probably one of the easiest, and business is also pretty easy. But biology is the one thing that I've seen most students struggle with. So we're going to see one of each. Let's see. Another one. Okay. This one here. So this is business. Okay. Remember that you have 45 seconds to read. I'm going to give you 45 seconds to read this text.
Now listen to a lecture from a marketing class. Okay, so I've actually got a few different examples of this. When I was a kid, a character named Action Hero was really popular with my friends and me. we would always watch the action hero program on television every week and play games, pretending that we were as strong and powerful as he was. Then pretty soon we began seeing these small action hero figures in all the stores. And, well, we all just had to have them. I mean, we'd been watching the television show for so long that it seemed only natural to want to own the toys, too. Well, I finally grew up and left the action hero television program and toys behind. But now I have a 7-year-old daughter who watches television a lot and also likes to play with her toys. And lately her favorite toy is a cute little baby doll with a big round face and lots of curly hair named Rosa. All my daughter's friends have Rosa dolls too, and they enjoy going to each other's houses to play with them. Then a few weeks ago, my daughter came running up to me all excited because she had just heard there was going to be a new television program on every week with the doll, Rosa, as the main character. So naturally, she and all her friends have begun watching the show, and it's already very popular as the toy doll.
Okay. So now I'm going to give you 30 seconds to prepare. Well, first the question says, using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of entertainment merchandise. Now I'll give you 30 seconds to prepare, but don't worry if you don't want to go yet. We can do it together too. Okay, but we're going to discuss it later. I'll give you now 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So do you feel ready? Do you want to try? Or do we talk about it first?
I can try.
Okay, perfect. Well, in that case, please, you can start speaking now.
Okay. According to the passage about entertainment merchandise, is defined as when they use a marketing practice in the entertainment of industry. In the lecture, the professor gives an example of when he was a kid and he watched in television's programs about different actions programs, and he saw what different games about powers and other things, and they want to have the same toys that the kids on the televisions has. And also he watched on TV programs, and he also played with that toys. And they give other example about her daughter that she wants to dolls too.
Okay. So I see that you got both in examples. In this case, we have 2 examples. But I think the problem is that maybe you didn't quite get the definition. So if you don't understand pretty well the definition, then the example won't be that well explained. So in this case, what is entertainment merchandising?
In the first line, used marketing practice in the entertainment industry is entertainment merchandising.
Exactly, it's a marketing. But what does this consist in? They say the brand or image from one product is also used to sell another product. That is the key part. So yes, it is a marketing practice where the brand or image from one product is also used to sell another, right? So you take the image or you take the brand from one product to create or to sell another product. So in the examples, the professor first talked about himself. As you said, when he was a kid, he used to watch this action program, right? And the main character of the action program was a little action hero in the program, right? In the show. Then another company, which was not the same company of the TV show, created a toy, created an action hero figure that was from the program, right? So this second company used the image of the action hero, used the image of that product to create and to sell another product, right? Which was the figure. So that is the example, right? Same thing in the case of his daughter. So he explains that in the second example, his daughter used to play a lot with this doll, which is I think called Rosa, right? So she and her friends loved the Rosa doll. And then a TV show was created about that toy. So the image of the toy was used to create a TV show, right? To sell another product. So that is entertainment merchandising, right? So yes, in this case, the key is understanding well the definition, right? So that then you can focus on important information. We're not going to focus too much on the details, but instead of telling me how the image from the TV show was used to sell the toy, or the other way around, how the image of the toy was used to sell the TV show. Okay?
Okay, I get it.
Okay, perfect. And then we can also do biology, this one here. So same thing, I'll give you 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. Okay, so a good example of this, found right here in North America, is something an animal called the American pronghorn does. Pronghorns, as you may know, are a kind of deer-like animal. They live out on the open, grassy plains, somewhat in the middle of North America. And they are super fast. Pronghorns are, in fact, noted for being the fastest animal in the Western Hemisphere. Once a pronghorn starts running, zoom! None of its present-day predators, like the bobcat or coyote, can even hope to catch up with it. It's off in a flash. Okay, so why then do pronghorns run so fast? That's the question. Well, it turns out that quite a long time ago, I'm talking tens of thousands of years, things on the grassy plains used to be very different for the pronghorns. Because back then, lions used to live on the plains, chasing and preying upon the pronghorns. And lions, of course, are a very swift-moving mammal, much faster than the bobcat or coyote or other predators that you find on the plains today. But now, however, lions are all extinct in North America. They're no longer a predator of the pronghorn. Tens of thousands of years ago, though, the lions were there, chasing the pronghorns. So, back then, the pronghorn's speed was critical to its survival.
Okay. So now the question says, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the concept of relict behavior. Now you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So you ready?
Yes, I can try.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. According to the passage about relic behavior, is defined as when the animal acting ways help them to survive. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of the tramhouse. There is an animal from the North America, and it live in the middle of the North America, and it's an animal that run fast, and it run away from predators, so it cannot catch up, and that's why the trampoline is so fast. So years ago, this animal wasn't faster, so they developed this kill, I think.
Okay, good. So same thing here. The key part is understanding the definition. So you said, so relic behavior when the animal acts in a way that helps them survive, right? But that's not what relic behavior is. Relic behavior is these behaviors known as relic behaviors. So basically, it's a behavior, and the purpose of this behavior, the original purpose of this behavior has disappeared long ago, right? So this behavior known as relic behaviors were useful to the animal years ago when the species habitat was different. But now, because of changed conditions, the behavior no longer serves its original purpose, right? So basically, relic behaviors are behaviors that are not useful to the animal now, but they were useful to the animal in the past when the habitat was different, right? So understanding that is going to help you understand better the example as well, because the example was about pronghorse, as you said, and these animals are pretty fast. That's the behavior. That's the relic behavior. So why is it a relic behavior? Because the fact that they are fast is not useful to the animal now. So they don't have to be that fast now. But they are fast because in the past, thousands of years ago, they needed to be fast in order to run away from lions, right? I think. But now lions are already extinct in this part of North America, so they don't have to run that much. But they are still fast because of their past conditions, right? Because they needed to be fast in the past to escape from lions. And now, even though there's no lions anymore, they are still that fast. So that is a relic behavior, right? A behavior that no longer has a purpose, but in the past it used to be useful for the animal. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Make sure that you understand the definition well. And one tip for your introduction, you're saying in the passage about, or according to the passage about relic behavior is defined as, so just eliminate the word about. Tell me, according to the passage, relic behavior is defined as, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Fancy, sure. So tomorrow we'll practice this question. We'll do as many as we can. But I don't know if you have any questions about today's class. Is everything clear?
Yes, everything is clear, so I have to practice.
Okay, Fancy, great. Then please don't forget today's survey. I am sending it right now. Okay, and I will be seeing you there tomorrow in class.
Okay, Andrea, thank you. See you tomorrow.